In 1977, twin sisters Sarah and Emma Chen walked into Lincoln Elementary School on what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday morning. By the end of that day, they had vanished without a trace during a devastating fire that consumed half the building. For 25 years, their disappearance remained one of the most haunting unsolved mysteries in the small town of Millbrook. Then in 2002, janitor Frank Rodriguez made a discovery behind the old boiler that would finally reveal the shocking truth about what really happened to the Chen twins. The story begins on March 15, 1977. Sarah and Emma Chen were 7-year-old identical twins who had just moved to Millbrook with their parents 6 months earlier. Their father, David Chen, worked as an accountant at the local bank, while their mother, Linda, taught piano lessons from their modest home on Elm Street. The girls were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and sharing an almost telepathic connection that fascinated their teachers and classmates alike. Sarah was the more outgoing of the two twins, always eager to raise her hand in class and make new friends during recess. She had a bright smile that could light up any room, and a contagious laugh that made everyone around her feel happy. Emma, though quieter by nature, possessed an artistic soul and could often be found sketching pictures of animals or flowers in the margins of her schoolwork. Despite their different personalities, the twins complemented each other perfectly, creating a bond that seemed unbreakable to everyone who knew them. That Tuesday morning started like any other in the Chen household. Linda woke up early to prepare breakfast for her family, making scrambled eggs and toast while humming her favorite classical melody. The twins came downstairs wearing their matching pink pajamas, their long black hair tousled from sleep. They chatted excitedly about the upcoming school art fair, where Emma planned to display her latest drawing of a rainbow over their house. Linda Chen packed the twins' matching blue lunchboxes with peanut butter sandwiches, apple slices, and chocolate chip cookies she had baked the night before. She added a thermos of milk for each girl and tucked in a small note with a heart drawn in red crayon, a daily tradition that always made the twins smile. The girls wore their favorite identical dresses, pink with white flowers, and their long black hair was braided in the same style their mother had taught them the week before. David Chen kissed his daughters goodbye as he left for work at the bank, reminding them to be good for their teacher and to look both ways before crossing any streets. The twins promised they would, giving their father tight hugs before settling down to finish their breakfast. At 7:20, Linda walked them to the front door, checking that they had their lunchboxes and homework folders. They kissed their mother goodbye at 7:30 and walked the 6 blocks to Lincoln Elementary, holding hands as they always did. The morning air was crisp and fresh, with the first signs of spring appearing in the small buds on the maple trees that lined their route. Sarah pointed out a robin building a nest in Mrs. Henderson's oak tree, while Emma wondered aloud if the bird's eggs would be blue like in her picture book. Mrs. Patterson, their second-grade teacher, remembered the twins arriving right on time at 8 o'clock sharp. They hung their matching pink backpacks in their assigned cubbies and placed their lunch boxes in the classroom refrigerator. Mrs. Patterson noticed that both girls seemed particularly excited about something, whispering to each other and giggling softly as they prepared for the school day to begin. The morning lessons proceeded normally, with reading time followed by arithmetic practice. Sarah raised her hand to answer a question about adding numbers during math class, confidently explaining her solution to the rest of the class. Meanwhile, Emma quietly drew pictures of horses in the margins of her workbook, creating an entire stable of beautiful animals with flowing manes and gentle eyes. Mrs. Patterson made a mental note to praise Emma's artistic talents during their next parent conference. During recess, the twins played on the swings together, taking turns pushing each other higher and higher into the crisp spring air. They laughed with pure joy as they soared back and forth, their identical dresses billowing in the breeze like pink and white flowers dancing in the wind. Other children joined them on the playground equipment, and soon Sarah and Emma were part of a larger group, playing an elaborate game of tag that stretched across the entire schoolyard. After recess, the twins returned to their classroom for science lessons about plants and animals. Emma was particularly interested in learning about butterflies and their transformation from caterpillars, while Sarah asked detailed questions about how flowers knew when to bloom in the spring. Mrs. Patterson was impressed by their curiosity and made plans to bring in some special books about nature for them to explore. Lunchtime was another happy occasion for the twins. They sat together at their usual spot in the cafeteria, sharing their sandwiches and cookies, while chatting with their classmates about weekend plans and favorite television shows. Sarah traded her apple slices for Emma's crackers, a common exchange that had become their daily routine. They both saved their chocolate chip cookies for last, savoring each bite while discussing what they wanted to draw during afternoon art time. The afternoon began with social studies, where the class learned about different communities and how people work together to make their towns special places to live. Sarah volunteered to read aloud from their textbook, her clear voice carrying across the classroom as she described the various jobs that people performed to help their neighbors. Emma listened intently while working on a detailed map of their own neighborhood, carefully drawing each house and labeling the streets with her neat handwriting. Everything was perfectly normal until 2:15 in the afternoon, when the peaceful routine of Lincoln Elementary was shattered by an event that would change the lives of everyone in the building forever. The fire started in the basement of Lincoln Elementary, in a storage room filled with old textbooks, cleaning supplies, and forgotten furniture from previous decades. The room had become a repository for items that nobody quite knew what to do with, but couldn't bring themselves to throw away. Boxes of outdated science equipment sat next to stacks of moldy encyclopedias, while bottles of industrial cleaners lined metal shelving units that had seen better days. Nobody knows exactly what caused the initial spark that ignited the devastating blaze. Some investigators later theorized that faulty electrical wiring might have created a short circuit, while others suggested that spontaneous combustion of old paper materials could have been the culprit. Regardless of the cause, within minutes of the first flame appearing, thick black smoke was pouring through the ventilation system that connected the basement to every floor of the building. The school's ancient fire alarm system, installed in the 1950s and barely maintained over the intervening decades, finally detected the smoke and activated with a shrill warning that echoed throughout the building. The piercing sound sent waves of panic through students and teachers alike, as everyone knew this was not one of their regularly scheduled fire drills. Mrs. Patterson later told investigators that she had been writing vocabulary words on the blackboard when the alarm began its urgent wailing. She immediately dropped her chalk and turned to face her 22 second-grade students, who were looking up at her with a mixture of confusion and growing fear. Following the practiced procedures they had rehearsed dozens of times throughout the school year, she quickly organized her class into 2 straight lines. She counted all 22 of her students as they lined up at the classroom door, checking each name off her mental attendance list. Sarah and Emma Chen stood together near the front of the line, holding hands as usual and looking remarkably calm, despite the chaos beginning to unfold around them. Mrs. Patterson remembered thinking how mature the twins seemed, compared to some of their classmates who were starting to cry or panic. The class moved quickly down the main hallway toward the nearest exit, following the painted arrows on the walls that led to safety. Mrs. Patterson walked alongside her students, constantly counting heads and making sure nobody fell behind or became separated from the group. The hallway was filling with other classes making their way toward various exits, and the noise level was rising as teachers called out instructions and younger children began to whimper with fear. But somewhere between the classroom and the schoolyard, in the midst of the organized chaos of evacuation procedures, the Chen twins simply disappeared. Mrs. Patterson would replay that journey in her mind thousands of times over the following years, trying to pinpoint the exact moment when Sarah and Emma vanished from her line of students. She remembered seeing them as they left the classroom, and she was almost certain they had still been there when they reached the main hallway intersection. The fire department received the first emergency call at 2:18 in the afternoon and arrived within 8 minutes, their red trucks racing through the quiet streets of Millbrook with sirens blaring and lights flashing. By the time they reached Lincoln Elementary, the flames had spread throughout the basement and were climbing up through the walls like hungry fingers reaching for more fuel to consume. Captain Robert Mills, a 20-year veteran of the fire department, immediately began coordinating the firefighting efforts while simultaneously organizing the evacuation procedures. He had 3 young children of his own at different schools in the district, and the thought of kids trapped in a burning building filled him with a determination that bordered on desperation. Firefighters worked desperately to control the blaze, unrolling their heavy hoses and connecting them to the nearest fire hydrants. The powerful streams of water created enormous clouds of steam as they met the intense heat, reducing visibility and making the work even more dangerous. Meanwhile, teachers and administrators frantically took attendance of the evacuated students who were gathering in the safety of the school parking lot. Principal Margaret Hoffman, a stern but caring woman who had dedicated her life to education, moved through the crowd of children and teachers with her clipboard, checking off names and trying to account for every single person who had been in the building when the fire started. Her heart sank when she realized that 2 students were missing from Mrs. Patterson's class roster. When Mrs. Patterson confirmed that Sarah and Emma Chen were nowhere to be found among her evacuated students, Principal Hoffman immediately radioed the information to Captain Mills. The fire chief's face turned pale as he received the news that 2 7-year-old children were potentially trapped somewhere inside the burning building. He knew that every second counted if there was any hope of finding them alive. Search efforts began immediately, even as firefighters continued battling the flames that were now consuming entire sections of the building. Captain Mills organized his most experienced firefighters into search teams, equipped with breathing apparatus and thermal imaging cameras that could potentially locate human bodies through the dense smoke and darkness. The twins' parents, David and Linda Chen, were at their respective jobs when they received the frantic phone call from the school. David was reviewing financial reports at the bank when his secretary rushed into his office with tears streaming down her face, barely able to speak the words that would shatter his world. Linda was in the middle of giving a piano lesson to one of her students when the telephone rang with news that no parent ever wants to hear. They both dropped everything and raced to the school, arriving within minutes of each other to find a scene of controlled chaos. Fire trucks surrounded the building, their rotating lights casting eerie red shadows across the parking lot, filled with evacuated children and distraught teachers. Smoke poured from the windows of the West Wing, and the acrid smell of burning materials filled the air. Linda collapsed to her knees in the parking lot when she realized her daughters were not among the safe children, screaming Sarah and Emma's names while David held her tight, his own face pale with terror. Other parents who had arrived to pick up their children tried to offer comfort, but there were no words that could ease the anguish of not knowing whether their little girls were dead or alive. Fire Chief Robert Mills made the difficult decision to send his bravest firefighters back into the burning building, specifically to search for Sarah and Emma. These men and women risked their own lives, crawling through smoke-filled corridors and checking every possible hiding place where 2 frightened children might have sought shelter from the flames and chaos. They combed through every accessible room, calling out the girls' names and checking under desks and closets, behind doors, and in any space large enough for a child to hide. The thick smoke made visibility nearly impossible, forcing the search teams to rely on their sense of touch and their knowledge of the building's layout to navigate through the dangerous environment. The intense heat from the fire forced the search teams to retreat multiple times as conditions became too dangerous for human survival. Each time they emerged from the building without finding the twins, the hopes of their parents and the entire community grew dimmer. Captain Mills coordinated the search efforts while simultaneously directing his crews in fighting the fire, knowing that time was running out for any survivors who might still be trapped inside. After 4 hours of dangerous searching, during which several firefighters suffered from smoke inhalation and minor burns, they found no trace of the twins. The building had been systematically searched from top to bottom, with every room, closet, and hiding place thoroughly examined. The search teams were forced to conclude that either the girls had somehow escaped the building on their own, or they had perished in areas too dangerous for human rescuers to access. The fire was finally extinguished at 9 o'clock that evening, after 7 hours of intensive firefighting efforts. The battle left behind a scene of devastating destruction that shocked everyone who witnessed it. The entire west wing of Lincoln Elementary had been reduced to charred rubble and ash, with twisted metal beams protruding from collapsed walls, like the skeleton of some prehistoric monster. The basement was completely gutted, filled with twisted metal pipes, collapsed ceiling beams, and inches of black sludge created by thousands of gallons of water mixed with ash and debris from the firefighters' hoses. The acrid smell of smoke and burned materials hung in the air for days afterward, serving as a constant reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded within these walls. Police Detective Ray Morrison, a methodical investigator with over 15 years of experience in missing persons cases, took charge of the investigation into the twins' disappearance. He understood that the first 48 hours were crucial in any missing child case, and he was determined to explore every possible lead and theory, no matter how unlikely it might seem. He began by interviewing every teacher, student, and staff member who had been in the building that day, carefully documenting their recollections and looking for any detail that might provide a clue to the twins' fate. Mrs. Patterson insisted she had seen both girls in her classroom just before the evacuation began, and she provided a detailed timeline of events leading up to their disappearance. Several students from Mrs. Patterson's class remembered seeing the twins in the hallway during the initial evacuation. walking hand in hand as they always did. Tommy Morrison, a classmate who had a crush on Sarah, specifically recalled seeing her pink dress in the crowded corridor. But after that initial sighting, the trail went completely cold, as if the twins had simply vanished into thin air. Detective Morrison explored every possible theory that might explain the twins' disappearance. Had Sarah and Emma become disoriented by the thick smoke and wandered into a different part of the building where they became trapped? Had they hidden somewhere out of fear and been overcome by smoke inhalation before rescuers could find them? Had someone taken advantage of the chaos to abduct them from the school grounds? The possibility of abduction seemed unlikely given the circumstances, but Detective Morrison investigated it thoroughly nonetheless. He interviewed every adult who had been on or near the school grounds that day, including delivery drivers, maintenance workers, and parents who had arrived to pick up their children. None of them reported seeing the twins after the evacuation began. Search teams combed through every inch of the burned building multiple times over the following weeks, using specialized equipment to probe through debris and collapsed sections that had been too dangerous to explore during the initial emergency response. They brought in trained search dogs capable of detecting human remains, even when buried under tons of rubble and ash. The dogs searched methodically through every section of the destroyed building, but they found no trace of the twins' bodies or any evidence that Sarah and Emma had ever been trapped inside. This puzzling absence of physical evidence only deepened the mystery and gave their parents a glimmer of hope that their daughters might somehow still be alive. Detective Morrison also investigated the possibility that the twins had somehow escaped the building on their own and become lost or confused in the surrounding area. Search parties composed of police officers, firefighters, and community volunteers scoured the woods behind the school, the nearby residential neighborhoods, and even the banks of Miller Creek that ran through the town. The community of Millbrook was devastated by the tragedy and rallied together in an unprecedented show of support for the Chen family. Hundreds of volunteers joined search parties that operated around the clock for weeks, methodically combing through every possible location where two frightened children might have sought shelter or become lost. Missing person flyers featuring the twins' smiling school photographs were printed by the thousands and posted on every telephone pole, store window, and bulletin board for miles around. Local businesses donated money for reward funds, while radio stations broadcast regular updates about the search efforts and appeals for information from anyone who might have seen the girls. The local newspaper, the Millbrook Gazette, ran front-page stories for weeks following the fire, keeping the community informed about search efforts and pleading for any information about Sarah and Emma's whereabouts. The editor, a veteran journalist named William Hayes, later said it was the most heartbreaking story he had ever covered in his 30-year career. David and Linda Chen never gave up hope that their daughters might still be alive somewhere, perhaps suffering from amnesia or being cared for by well-meaning strangers who didn't realize the girls were missing. They hired private investigators with expertise in missing children cases, spending their life savings on efforts to find any trace of Sarah and Emma. They consulted psychics and fortune tellers, despite their natural skepticism about such methods, because they were willing to try anything that might provide a clue to their daughter's whereabouts. They followed up on every possible lead, no matter how unlikely, traveling to distant cities whenever someone reported seeing children who resembled the twins. David quit his job at the bank to dedicate his time completely to searching for the twins and coordinating with law enforcement agencies across multiple states. He created a detailed filing system to track every lead and tip that came in, determined not to let any potential clue slip through the cracks due to poor organization or lack of follow-through. Linda stopped teaching piano lessons and spent her days calling police departments in neighboring towns and counties, asking if anyone matching her daughter's descriptions had been found. She also contacted hospitals, children's shelters, and foster care agencies, hoping against hope that someone somewhere had encountered her missing girls. The strain of not knowing what had happened to their children began to take a severe toll on the Chen marriage. Both parents dealt with their grief and anxiety in different ways, and their relationship suffered as they struggled to support each other while battling their own demons of guilt, fear, and desperate hope. Years passed without any new developments in the case, and the initial intensity of the search efforts gradually diminished as other priorities and emergencies demanded the attention of law enforcement resources. Detective Morrison continued to follow up on occasional tips and leads, but the case was slowly relegated to the cold case files that accumulated dust in the basement of the police station. Detective Morrison retired in 1985, 8 years after the twins' disappearance, and passed the file to his replacement with a heavy heart. He had worked on hundreds of missing person cases during his career, but the Chen twins haunted him like no other case he had ever handled. The mystery of their disappearance consumed him even in retirement. The Chen family eventually made the painful decision to move away from Millbrook in 1983, 6 years after the fire. They could no longer bear living in the town where their daughters had vanished, where every street corner and familiar landmark served as a constant reminder of their loss. They relocated to a larger city several hundred miles away, hoping that a change of scenery might help them heal and move forward with their lives. The burned section of Lincoln Elementary was demolished and rebuilt with modern safety features and updated fire prevention systems. The new construction included state-of-the-art sprinkler systems, multiple emergency exits, and improved ventilation designed to prevent smoke from spreading through the building during any future emergencies. Despite the modern improvements, many residents of Millbrook felt an eerie presence in the halls where the twins had once played and learned. Teachers reported strange sounds and unexplained cold spots in certain areas of the building, though most dismissed these experiences as products of imagination and the power of suggestion. Students sometimes claimed to see 2 little girls in pink dresses playing on the swings during recess, but when they looked more closely, no one was there. Parents and school officials attributed these sightings to the continuing impact of the twin story on the community's collective memory and the natural tendency of children to create imaginary explanations for things they didn't understand. Frank Rodriguez began working as a janitor at Lincoln Elementary in 1995, 18 years after the fire that had claimed national attention and forever changed the small town of Millbrook. He was a quiet, hard-working man in his 50s who took tremendous pride in keeping the school clean and safe for the children who attended classes there every day. Frank had moved to Millbrook from a larger city where he had worked in factory maintenance for most of his adult life. He was looking for a slower pace and a more meaningful way to spend his remaining working years before retirement. The janitor position at Lincoln Elementary appealed to him because it allowed him to contribute to the education and well-being of young people. He had heard the stories about the missing twins from other staff members during his first week on the job, but he treated them as tragic history rather than an ongoing mystery that might somehow be resolved. The stories were part of the school's folklore, passed down from one generation of teachers and staff to the next, like a cautionary tale about the importance of emergency preparedness. The school's basement had been completely renovated after the fire, with new plumbing systems, updated electrical work, and a modern boiler room that provided efficient heating for the entire building. The renovation had been extensive, essentially gutting the entire lower level and rebuilding it according to contemporary safety standards and building codes. Frank spent several hours each week in the basement, performing routine maintenance tasks and checking on the various mechanical systems that kept the building running smoothly throughout the school year. He knew every pipe, valve, switch, and component in the maze of corridors and utility rooms that existed below the classrooms where children learned and played. He was methodical in his approach to maintenance, keeping detailed records of his inspections and repairs in a logbook that he reviewed regularly to identify patterns or potential problems before they became serious issues. His diligence and attention to detail earned him the respect of the school administration and the teaching staff. In early 2002, 25 years after the tragic fire, Frank began noticing that the basement's main boiler was making unusual noises and running less efficiently than normal. The heating system had been installed during the post-fire renovation and was now showing its age after more than 2 decades of continuous operation. The boiler was struggling to maintain consistent temperatures throughout the building, and Frank was having to adjust the settings more frequently than usual to keep the classrooms comfortable for students and teachers. He documented these issues in his maintenance log and recommended to the school administration that they have a professional heating contractor evaluate the system. The 25-year-old heating system was nearing the end of its expected lifespan and was due for replacement, but budget constraints meant the school board wanted to squeeze a few more years out of the equipment if possible. Educational funding was always tight in small communities like Millbrook, and major capital expenditures like heating system replacement required careful planning and community support. Frank called in Mike Sullivan, a heating contractor who had serviced the school's systems for several years and was familiar with the building's mechanical infrastructure. Mike had a reputation for honest assessments and quality work, and Frank trusted his professional judgment about whether repairs might extend the boiler's useful life. Mike Sullivan arrived on a cold February morning in 2002 to examine the boiler and assess what might be causing the performance issues Frank had documented. The two men worked together to remove the outer panels and inspect the internal components, looking for signs of wear, corrosion, or other problems that might explain the system's declining efficiency. Everything seemed relatively normal for a heating system of that age, until Mike noticed something unusual about one section of the boiler's housing. There was a rectangular metal panel that didn't match the original design specifications he remembered from the installation manual. The panel appeared to have been added sometime after the initial installation, though he couldn't imagine why such a modification would have been necessary. The panel was secured with standard bolts and didn't appear to serve any functional purpose related to the boiler's operation. Mike had worked on hundreds of similar heating systems over his 20-year career, and he had never seen anything quite like this apparently unnecessary addition to the equipment housing. Curiosity got the better of both men, and they decided to remove the mysterious panel to see what might be behind it. Perhaps there was some kind of access port or maintenance feature that wasn't documented in the system manual. Frank fetched his toolbox and carefully unscrewed the bolts holding the panel in place, working slowly to avoid damaging the surrounding equipment. As the metal sheet came free and Frank lifted it away from the boiler housing, both men stepped back in shock and horror at what they discovered hidden inside the hollow space behind the panel. After 25 years of searching, wondering, and speculation, the mystery of what had happened to Sarah and Emma Chen was finally, devastatingly revealed. Behind the panel was a small hollow space, just large enough for two children to crawl inside and huddle together. The space had been created accidentally during the boiler installation, when the new heating system was fitted into the renovated basement, and there, in that cramped hiding place, were the remains of the Chen twins. Sarah and Emma were still huddled together exactly as they must have been on that terrible day in 1977, their arms wrapped around each other in a final embrace that spoke of their unbreakable bond, even in the face of death. Their pink dresses with white flowers were still recognizable, though faded and deteriorated after more than 2 decades in the hidden space. Next to the twins were their matching blue lunchboxes, still containing the desiccated remnants of the peanut butter sandwiches and chocolate chip cookies their mother had lovingly packed on what turned out to be their last morning alive. The thermos containers had long since emptied, but the metal lunchboxes had protected some of their contents from complete decay. Frank Rodriguez stared at the heartbreaking scene in stunned silence for several long moments before his training and sense of responsibility kicked in. He immediately called the police, his hands shaking as he dialed the emergency number and tried to find the words to explain what he and Mike had discovered in the school basement. Within an hour of Frank's phone call, the basement was filled with investigators, forensic specialists, county officials, and representatives from the state medical examiner's office. The discovery made headlines across the region and reopened wounds that had never fully healed in the hearts of everyone who remembered the twins' disappearance. The forensic investigation revealed that Sarah and Emma had somehow accessed this hidden space during the chaos of the fire evacuation 25 years earlier. The narrow opening was partially concealed behind some pipes and mechanical equipment, making it nearly invisible unless someone was looking specifically for it or knew exactly where to find it. The medical examiner determined that both girls had died from smoke inhalation, which suggested they had crawled into the space to escape the fire, but became trapped when the building filled with deadly carbon monoxide and other toxic fumes. Their deaths would have been relatively quick and painless, which provided some small comfort to their family and friends. The positioning of their bodies indicated that the twins had held each other as they died, maintaining their close bond even in their final moments. This detail, while heartbreaking, also spoke to the deep love and connection that had defined their short lives and made their disappearance so particularly tragic for everyone who knew them. But how had Sarah and Emma ended up in such an unusual and well-hidden location? Further investigation of the school's construction records revealed important details about the post-fire renovation that had created this accidental hiding place. The boiler installation in the mid-1970s had required modifications to accommodate the new heating system in the existing basement space. The renovation contractors had needed to work around existing structural elements and utility lines, which sometimes required creative solutions to fit modern equipment into older buildings. During this process, they had inadvertently created several small void spaces when the new heating system was fitted around existing architectural features. The space where the twins were found wasn't shown on any architectural blueprints or mechanical drawings because it had been created accidentally during the installation process. The contractors had simply covered these void spaces with metal panels to create a neat, finished appearance, without realizing they were creating potential hiding places. Detective Sarah Walsh, who had inherited the cold case files when she joined the Millbrook Police Department, theorized about how the twins might have discovered this hiding place and why they might have sought shelter there during the fire. Children are naturally curious about secret places and hidden areas that adults might overlook or dismiss. It seemed likely that Sarah and Emma had discovered this loose panel and the space behind it during one of their explorations of the school building. Perhaps they had noticed that the panel could be moved or had heard hollow sounds when something bumped against it. Their natural curiosity would have led them to investigate further. The twins may have crawled inside this space on previous occasions to play or hide, turning it into their own secret fort where they could whisper and giggle without being discovered by teachers or other students. Many children create such special places where they can retreat from the adult world and share their private thoughts and games. When the fire alarm sounded that Tuesday afternoon and panic filled the hallways of Lincoln Elementary, the frightened girls may have instinctively run to their secret hiding place rather than following the evacuation procedures they had practiced in fire drills. In their 7-year-old minds, this hidden space represented safety and security from the chaos and danger surrounding them. The tragic irony was that Sarah and Emma had actually been inside the building during all those desperate search efforts conducted by firefighters and rescue workers in 1977. The searchers had walked past their hiding place countless times during those frantic hours, never realizing that the children they were risking their lives to find were just feet away from them. The twins were concealed behind what appeared to be nothing more than a standard maintenance panel on a piece of mechanical equipment. Even the most experienced firefighters and search specialists had no reason to suspect that such a panel might conceal a space large enough for 2 children to hide in. The space had remained undiscovered through decades of routine maintenance and periodic renovations because it appeared to be an integral part of the boiler housing. Various maintenance workers and contractors had worked in that basement over the years, without ever having reason to remove that particular panel or investigate what might be behind it. David and Linda Chen, who had divorced several years after moving away from Millbrook, were contacted immediately after Frank's discovery. The decades of not knowing what had happened to their daughters had taken a tremendous toll on both of them personally and on their relationship as a married couple. Both parents had struggled to cope with the ambiguous loss of their children, never knowing whether Sarah and Emma were dead or alive somewhere in the world. This uncertainty had made it impossible for them to properly grieve and move forward with their lives, leaving them suspended in a state of perpetual hope and despair. Despite the pain of learning that their daughters were indeed dead, both David and Linda expressed a sense of relief that the mystery had finally been solved and that they could at last lay their children to rest. The not knowing had been perhaps even more torturous than the certainty of death, because it had prevented them from achieving any kind of closure or acceptance. The funeral for Sarah and Emma Chen took place on a sunny Saturday morning in March 2002, exactly 25 years and 1 week after their disappearance during the Lincoln Elementary fire. The service was held at Millbrook Community Church, the largest venue in town, to accommodate the hundreds of people who wanted to pay their respects to the twins and their family. The church was filled to capacity with people whose lives had been touched by the twins' story over the past quarter century. Many of their former classmates, now adults with children of their own, attended the service along with teachers, school administrators, firefighters, police officers, and community members who had participated in the original search efforts. Mrs. Patterson, their second-grade teacher who was now retired and in her 70s, read a poem she had written about the lasting impact that Sarah and Emma had made during their brief time in her classroom. Through her tears, she spoke about their curiosity, their kindness to other students, and the special bond they shared as sisters. The service included readings from children's books that the twins had loved, songs from their elementary school music program, and remembrances from family friends who shared memories of the girls' personalities and the joy they had brought to everyone around them. The ceremony celebrated their lives, rather than focusing solely on the tragedy of their deaths. Frank Rodriguez attended the funeral along with Mike Sullivan, both men deeply affected by their role in finally bringing closure to this long-standing mystery. Frank had not expected to become part of such a significant moment in the town's history when he took the job as school janitor, but he felt honored to have been able to provide answers for the Chen family and the entire community. Following the funeral service, Frank established a small memorial garden at Lincoln Elementary in Sarah and Emma's honor, using his own money and donated materials from local businesses. He planted twin cherry trees in a quiet corner of the school grounds, selecting a variety that would bloom every spring with delicate pink flowers, reminiscent of the dresses the girls had worn on their last day. The memorial garden also included a small bench where students could sit and reflect, surrounded by flowers that bloomed throughout the school year. A bronze plaque mounted on a granite stone told the story of the Chen twins and reminded visitors that they would always be remembered as part of the Lincoln Elementary family. The discovery also brought a measure of closure to the firefighters and police officers who had searched so desperately for the twins in 1977. Fire Chief Mills, who had retired years earlier, said that not finding Sarah and Emma had haunted him for 25 years and had been one of the greatest professional failures of his career. Captain Mills had always wondered if his search teams could have done something differently, looked somewhere they had missed, or been more creative in their approach to finding the missing children. Learning that the twins had been hidden in an essentially invisible location helped ease the guilt and self-doubt he had carried for more than 2 decades. Many of the firefighters who had participated in the original search efforts attended a special ceremony at the fire station where they shared their memories of that terrible day and reflected on the lessons they had learned. The case became a reminder of how even the most thorough and well-intentioned efforts can sometimes fall short due to circumstances beyond anyone's control. The case of the Chen twins became a catalyst for improved emergency procedures and safety protocols at schools throughout the region. The discovery revealed how children might instinctively seek out hiding places during emergencies instead of following established evacuation procedures, leading to enhanced training programs that addressed this possibility. School administrators across the state implemented new safety reviews designed to identify any spaces where children might accidentally become trapped or hidden during emergencies. These inspections included thorough examinations of mechanical rooms, utility areas, and any other locations that might not be immediately obvious to search teams. The story of Sarah and Emma Chen also prompted discussions about how to better prepare children psychologically for emergency situations, helping them understand the importance of staying with their teachers and classmates rather than seeking individual hiding places that might seem safer but could actually put them in greater danger. The community of Millbrook erected a permanent memorial to the Chen twins in the town square, funded by donations from local residents and businesses who wanted to ensure that Sarah and Emma would never be forgotten. The bronze plaque features their smiling faces from their school photographs and includes an inscription about love, memory, and the bonds that connect us all. The memorial serves as a gathering place for annual remembrance ceremonies and provides a focal point for community reflection on the importance of cherishing the time we have with our loved ones. It has become a tradition for elementary school classes to visit the memorial during field trips and learn about the twins' story as part of their local history education. Frank Rodriguez continued working at Lincoln Elementary until his retirement in 2010, 13 years after making the discovery that solved one of the town's greatest mysteries. He never forgot that day in the basement, and he made sure that every new staff member who joined the school heard the story of Sarah and Emma Chen. Frank believed it was important for people to remember the twins not as victims of a tragic accident, but as 2 little girls who had brought joy and laughter to everyone who knew them during their brief time on Earth. He wanted their memory to inspire kindness, curiosity, and the kind of close family bonds that had made their relationship so special. During his remaining years at the school, Frank took particular care of the memorial garden he had created, pruning the cherry trees, tending the flowers, and maintaining the bench where students often came to sit quietly and think. He would sometimes find small drawings or notes left by children who had been moved by the twins' story, and he carefully collected these tributes in a special scrapbook that he kept in his office. The cherry trees that Frank had planted grew tall and strong over the years, their branches gradually intertwining as they reached toward the sky. Each spring, when the pink blossoms appeared, Frank would pause in his daily maintenance routine to appreciate their beauty and remember the 2 little girls whose memory they honored. Teachers at Lincoln Elementary began incorporating the twins' story into their lessons about community, friendship, and the importance of following safety rules. The tale became a gentle way to help children understand that tragic things sometimes happen, but that love and memory can help us cope with loss and find meaning even in the darkest circumstances. The case file on the Chen twins was officially closed in March 2002, 25 years after it had been opened. Detective Walsh completed the final report with a mixture of satisfaction at solving the mystery and sadness at the tragic outcome that had finally been revealed. The thick folder was moved from the active case files to the solved case archives, where it joined thousands of other investigations that had reached their conclusions. Local news media covered the story extensively when the twins were first discovered, bringing renewed attention to the case that had captivated the region a quarter-century earlier. Television reporters interviewed Frank Rodriguez, Mike Sullivan, and various community members who remembered the original search efforts and the impact the disappearance had on Millbrook. The story attracted national attention as well, with several true crime television programs featuring the case as an example of how missing person mysteries can sometimes be solved decades after they occur. The unusual circumstances of the discovery and the tragic nature of the story resonated with audiences who were moved by the twins' fate. Sarah and Emma's story became part of a growing awareness about the importance of thoroughly investigating older buildings for potential safety hazards that might not be apparent to casual observers. Building inspectors began paying closer attention to spaces that could inadvertently trap people during emergencies, leading to improved safety standards and inspection procedures. The Chen family's long ordeal also highlighted the need for better support services for families of missing persons, particularly in cases where the fate of loved ones remains unknown for extended periods. Their experience demonstrated how ambiguous loss can be even more difficult to bear than confirmed death, because it prevents the normal grieving process from taking place. Linda Chen, now remarried and living in a distant state, established a small scholarship fund at Lincoln Elementary to help children participate in art programs and music lessons. She wanted to honor Emma's artistic talents and Sarah's love of learning by providing opportunities for other children to explore their own creative abilities. David Chen, who had never remarried after his divorce from Linda, became an advocate for missing children's causes and worked with various organizations to improve search procedures and family support services. He channeled his years of anguish into efforts that might help other families avoid the prolonged uncertainty that had dominated his life for so long. The former site of the original Lincoln Elementary, where the fire had occurred in 1977, was eventually converted into a small community park with playground equipment and picnic tables. Local residents appreciated having a green space in the heart of town, though many still felt a somber atmosphere when they visited the location where such a tragedy had unfolded. Children who played in the park were often unaware of its history, running and laughing on the same ground where Sarah and Emma had once attended school. Their innocent joy served as a reminder that life continues even after terrible events, and that new generations can find happiness in places that once knew sorrow. The heating contractor Mike Sullivan was profoundly affected by his role in discovering the twins' remains. He had expected a routine maintenance call that February morning in 2002, not a moment that would change his understanding of the community's history and his own small part in bringing closure to a decades-old mystery. Mike began volunteering with local search and rescue organizations, using his mechanical knowledge and problem-solving skills to help in efforts to find missing persons in the region. He felt that his experience with the Chen twins had given him a unique perspective on how people might become hidden in unexpected places during emergencies. The story of Sarah and Emma Chen became a cautionary tale told in firefighter training programs across the country, illustrating how thorough searches must sometimes look beyond obvious hiding places to consider spaces that might not be immediately apparent to rescuers. The case study was used to emphasize the importance of questioning assumptions about building layouts and potential hiding spots. Fire departments began developing new protocols for searching buildings that included more systematic approaches to identifying and investigating any spaces where people might become trapped or hidden. These procedures were particularly important for older buildings that had been renovated or modified over time, potentially creating unintended void spaces. The psychological impact of the twins' disappearance and eventual discovery extended far beyond their immediate family to affect an entire generation of Millbrook residents who had grown up with the mystery as part of their community's identity. Many people found that learning the truth brought both relief and renewed sadness as they processed the reality of what had happened. Former classmates of the twins, now adults with families of their own, organized annual memorial gatherings where they shared memories and reflected on how the tragedy had influenced their own lives and perspectives. These informal reunions became important healing rituals that helped the community work through its collective grief and trauma. The Lincoln Elementary Memorial Garden became a popular destination for school field trips from neighboring communities, as educators recognized the value of teaching children about local history and the importance of emergency preparedness. The garden provided a beautiful and peaceful setting for these educational visits. Students would often ask their teachers difficult questions about death, loss, and why bad things happen to good people after learning about Sarah and Emma's story. These conversations, while challenging, provided valuable opportunities for adults to help children process complex emotions and develop resilience in the face of life's uncertainties. The cherry trees that Frank had planted continued to be the centerpiece of the memorial garden, their annual blooming cycle serving as a natural reminder of renewal and the passage of time. Each spring brought new flowers and fresh hope, while the falling petals reminded visitors of the fragility and preciousness of life. Local photographers began documenting the trees throughout the seasons, creating a visual record of how the memorial evolved over time. These images were often used in community publications and historical displays that commemorated the twins and educated new residents about their story. The bronze plaque in the town square became a gathering point for various community events and ceremonies, particularly during National Missing Children's Day and other occasions when the community wanted to honor the memory of children who had been lost. The memorial served multiple purposes, honoring the Chen twins specifically, while also acknowledging other tragedies that had affected local families. As years passed, the story of Sarah and Emma Chen became woven into the fabric of Millbrook's identity, joining other historical events and local legends that shaped how residents understood their community's character. The tale was passed down from parents to children, ensuring that new generations would remember the twins and the lessons their story contained. The case also became an important part of the training curriculum at the State Police Academy, where detectives learned about the importance of persistence, thorough investigation, and keeping cold cases active even when leads seemed to have been exhausted. The Chen twins' story demonstrated how answers might eventually emerge from unexpected sources. Frank Rodriguez's discovery in the basement of Lincoln Elementary became a defining moment, not just for the Chen family and the Millbrook community, but for anyone who had ever wondered about the fate of missing persons whose stories seemed destined to remain forever unsolved. The case proved that sometimes the truth is hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right person to look in the right place at the right time. The boiler where the twins were found was eventually replaced with a new, more efficient heating system. The old equipment was carefully dismantled and disposed of with appropriate ceremony, as community members felt it deserved respectful treatment, given its role in finally revealing the truth about Sarah and Emma's fate. The space where the twins had hidden was filled in during the new boiler installation, ensuring that no other children could ever become trapped in a similar manner. The renovation included additional safety features and inspection protocols, designed to prevent any similar tragedies from occurring in the future. Today, visitors to Lincoln Elementary can still see Frank's memorial garden, where the twin cherry trees bloom each spring, their branches now fully intertwined in a living symbol of the unbreakable bond that Sarah and Emma shared throughout their brief lives and into eternity. The trees have become a symbol of hope and remembrance for the entire community. When the wind blows through the pink blossoms on warm spring days, some people say they can almost hear the sound of children's laughter carried on the breeze, a gentle reminder that love and memory can transcend even the greatest tragedies, and that the spirits of those we have lost continue to touch our lives in ways both seen and unseen. The story of Sarah and Emma Chen teaches us that sometimes the answers we desperately seek are closer than we could ever imagine, hidden behind the ordinary facades of our everyday world, waiting patiently for the right moment to reveal themselves. Their legacy reminds us to hold our loved ones close, to never take for granted the precious moments we share together, and to always remember that even in our darkest hours, love endures. The twins' story also demonstrates the profound impact that ordinary people can have when they approach their daily work with care, attention to detail, and genuine concern for others. Frank Rodriguez was simply doing his job as a janitor when he made the discovery that brought peace to a grieving family and closure to an entire community. proving that heroism often comes from unexpected places. Most importantly, the tale of Sarah and Emma Chen shows us that some mysteries, no matter how long they remain unsolved, eventually find their way to the light. Their story reminds us that truth has a persistent nature and that patience, perseverance, and sometimes a little bit of luck can finally provide answers to questions that have haunted us for decades. What do you think about this incredible discovery that brought closure to a 25-year-old mystery? Have you ever heard of a missing person case that was solved decades later through an unexpected discovery? Share your thoughts in the comments below about how this story affected you. And don't forget to subscribe for more amazing true stories that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the mysteries that surround us every day.